Hello and welcome. This is Out Motorsports. My name is Jake and this is the 2020 Toyota Supra. Yes, this is the 5th generation Supra that was hotly anticipated after the 4th generation left the United States and left Toyota's product portfolio in the late 1990s. Now, of course, every outlet in the world has seemingly covered this Supra already. We finally got our hands on one, and like I said, this is a 2020, not the upcoming 2021. Now, there are some changes for the 2021 model year. The 2021s are not quite yet in the press fleets for most of us to have access to, but we will be taking a closer look at those when they are available to us. In the meantime, the basic formula of the 2020 and 2021 Supra has not changed, so what we're here to find out is if this car makes a great daily driver and can hold its own at a track day. So, let's find out. All right, now before we get too far into the depths of the 2020 Supra, it bears mentioning that I personally am an unashamed BMW fan. I've owned about 12. I still own a 1997 M3 that I race with the National Autosport Association. You've seen those videos right here. And I bring this up because there is a certain old BMW vibe that I really, really love in the way the cars drive, the way the engines rev out and sound, and the way the whole package kind of comes together and feels. And I also bring it up because this 2020 Supra, as many people know, was co-developed by Toyota alongside BMW. Toyota did have a pretty substantial hand in the development of some parts of this car, but underneath it is all BMW. Even the Toyota badge on the hood has a BMW part number. Now, I say this not to generate a bunch of hatred towards Toyota for sullying the Supra name, but it is worth mentioning that, the older Supras were Toyota flagships with all Toyota hardware. And the reason Toyota claims they went with BMW to help develop this was obviously, one, to help share the cost, but two, because BMW already had federally approved inline 6-cylinder engines, because all of the BMW 6-cylinders are a straight 6. And the Supra kind of made its mark with the 2JZ inline 6. Now, the inline 6 that's in this car, don't know if it'll be quite that legendary over the long term, but in any case, Toyota felt that having a straight 6 engine was the most important characteristic of the Supra. So instead of developing something in-house, which would be very costly, they went to BMW, shared the development, and what they basically got was their own body. They got their own engine and suspension tuning on the basic Z4 platform, and the whole thing is built by Magna Steyr in Austria. Now, popping the hood, you will see a Toyota branded engine beauty cover for engine beauty and sound deadening. That said, if you avert your gaze just a little bit further north towards the hood, you'll see the emission sticker that states that this car was made by Bayerische Motorenwerk AG, which is BMW. I probably butchered that German, but sorry. This is a BMW straight 6 inline 6-cylinder turbocharged that BMW calls the B58. Now, the B58 is in a lot of different BMW models, including the Z4 platform mate to this, the X3, the M340, things like that. Now, the engine that is in this 2020 Supra does not make quite as much power as what was in the 2020 Z4. This particular 2020 Supra makes 335 crank horsepower and about 365 pound-feet of torque. Now, those are great numbers. The car does not weigh a whole lot. It weighs just shy of 3,400 pounds, but the 2021 Supras have a revised exhaust manifold and different pistons and slightly different tuning, and that brings them from 335 horsepower to 382 horsepower, which is basically in line with the Z4 with the same engine. Now, paired to this B58 6-cylinder, you have the now ubiquitous across any brand, more or less, ZF 8-speed automatic. You cannot get a manual transmission in this car. A lot of people, a lot of enthusiasts who claim they'll buy these things when they're 20 years old and heavily depreciated are really crying and moaning about it. And of course, all of that power is fed from the engine to the transmission to the rear wheels only via an electronically controlled limited slip differential. So that's more or less the nuts and bolts of the 2020 Toyota Supra. Let's hop behind the wheel and see how this thing is to drive on the street. All right, so driving the 2020 Toyota Supra as a full street car. We'll get to the track car stuff in a bit, but before that, how is this thing to drive just every day? I wouldn't say it's the best car for street driving, but it's pretty good. I mentioned there's all these ties to BMW with the current Z4 platform, and I also mentioned all of my past BMW ownership history. And I learned how to drive stick shift on a 1999 BMW Z3. And what's fun for me is this car feels like a throwback to that older BMW era, especially with the Z3, which predated the Z4. In all cases, you've got this really long hood out in front of you. It feels like you're sitting on the rear axle, which is only kind of the case. You're not really sitting that far back, but it certainly feels like it. Now, the one thing with this long hood, as beautiful as it is, and the seating position is really quite lovely in relationship to the hood, it feels very long in a parking garage. If you're trying to carefully maneuver this car and not hit anything, the hood does seem to go on for almost forever. And you do have front parking sensors, but there's no front camera, so you can't quite see what's going on. You just have to be careful. Now, when you put the car into sport mode, everything stiffens up, the steering becomes heavy, the exhaust becomes loud, the throttle response gets sharper, the transmission wants to shift more aggressively, whether you're letting it do its own thing or use the paddles on the steering wheel. And it's a nice contrast to the normal mode. The one element to all of this is this exhaust. It is childish, and you will love it or hate it, or love it and hate it. It almost feels like they left an extra fuel injector in the exhaust somewhere to just dump fuel when you lift off the throttle. You lift off and it's just like everywhere. And everyone will stare, and you have to really want that. Otherwise, you will want to leave the exhaust in normal mode. And the nice thing is you can control each of those different components of the car separately. You can set up an individual program. So if you don't want the shouty exhaust, that's okay. I do like the shouty exhaust for the sake of just making fun noises, but I don't like it all the time. I do like the stiffer steering and other elements of sport mode. So you can configure that however you want. And the whole theme of this Toyota Supra is that you're really going for the driving experience and the drivetrain over all else. You know, this is not, if you want all of the luxuries, this is not the car for you. If you want the best sound system in the industry, this is not the car for you. But what you do get is a really, really excellent BMW straight six that is turbocharged, paired to an excellent ZF 8-speed automatic. It's the same one that the whole industry is using at this point, paired to an electronically controlled limited slip differential. This is a car for people who know how to drive, who want to learn how to drive better, faster, safer, and who really care about the driving experience over all else. The seats, the sound system, the interior, everything is good enough to wrap around this excellent drivetrain and have it be what feels like a slightly shrunken GT car. And I really appreciate what they've done here. Now, as far as power is concerned, like I said, this 2020 Supra only has 335 horsepower. The new 2021 six-cylinder Supras will have 382. I don't think the car necessarily needs it, to be honest. In sport mode or normal mode, going down an on-ramp, I've had several instances where I'm thinking, oh, let me get ahead of these people, I'll just give it a little more throttle. And seriously, you give it another 5 or 10% at most, and you look down and you're going 75 or 80 down the on-ramp out of nowhere. And if the car's not in sport mode, that whole process can be very drama-free. Or if it is in sport mode, it can be full of bangs and burbles and cracks and pops. But, you know, in any case, the car is plenty fast with 335 horsepower. The one thing that I don't love about this 2020 Supra is related to getting in and driving it. It's both the door opening and then the seat once you're in. The door opening is fairly low, the roofline is low. You've got a bubble over the driver's head and the passenger's head, so once you're seated in here, you've got the headroom, you've got the wig room, but when you're going to get in, you do have to really contort yourself to get in and out, and if you're tall, that can be a little bit of a challenge. Once you're in here, again, another tall people problem. Unlike BMW seats that often have an extendable thigh bolster to give you really nice leg and thigh support, if you're taller and longer of leg, the seats in here do not have that. They do adjust well enough, but I think while I find the back cushion to be really comfortable, it's got adjustable lumbar and adjustable side bolster support, the bottom cushion where your butt and your legs go does not really do it for me. And that is it for the 2020 Toyota Supra on the street. Let's head over to Virginia International Raceway and see how the 2020 Supra performs when you're throwing it around a racetrack. This is another 2020 Toyota Supra. This is a 2020 Toyota Supra Launch Edition. They made 1,500 of these. The Launch Edition basically amounts to some visual differences. The performance elements of the car are not changed compared to the other 2020 model years. So we're gonna take this Toyota Supra Launch Edition out and see how it performs completely stock around VIR. Alright, so as we get started on this lap of VIR, I'll first apologize for the track footage being a bit washed out. My GoPro is not always a fan of metering the right part of the shot. In any case, let's talk about the Supra Launch Edition as we come through turn 1. This 2020 Toyota Supra Launch Edition is completely stock, although the owner did put fresh Motul RBF brake fluid in the car before the weekend began. Motul has a higher boiling point than most brake fluid that your car would come with from the factory, and keeping the fluid happy means you can hammer on the brakes all weekend and they'll generally hold up. I left the Supra in manual mode and was pleased to find the paddle shifters responded quickly and listened to me fully. There were no surprise upshifts, and the car would let me bang against the rev limiter all lap if I wanted to. The ZF8 speed is great on track and I have no complaints. Now as we go through the flat S's and approach the climbing S's, I chose to keep the car off the curbing in the climbing S's. With a short wheelbase and very little factory aero, the chassis really didn't like the curbing and got pretty unsettled. Staying on the asphalt kept the Supra as a willing and quick partner up the climbing S's and into South Bend. Heading down into Oak Tree, hard on the brakes, I exited Oak Tree in third gear with my right foot hard down, and the car just pulls. The B58 engine has plenty of power and torque, even in this 2020 Supra making 335 horsepower versus the new car's 382. And as I flew down the back straight with speed building very rapidly, I made the conscious decision to lift throttle around 135 miles an hour. The car had more straight line speed in it, but I really didn't want to overcook those stock brake pads and made sure I kept some stopping power in reserve. Now coming down through the roller coaster, it's really hard to keep a smile off your face with such a responsive chassis. Turn in this car is eager, and the Supra is generally predictable lap after lap. Alright, and that is the 2020 Toyota Supra. Thank you so much for coming along today. As always, if you like what we're up to, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram. A full written review of this 2020 Supra and the associated track time that we got with another Supra at VIR will be available on outmotorsports.com, so head over there for more of this content. Until next time, thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon.